Hello and welcome to another episode of Communication How. Today, we will be dealing with the theme Forms and Benefits of Human Communication. As you all know, human communications is a vast subject area and it is something that we use in our day to day lives. The various forms, the various elements of human communication are probably some that you would have used right from your childhood up till now. And therefore, what is important is that we need to analyze some of their benefits, and at the same time, we should be able, in order to understand them, so that we can use them effectively in communicating with others. So let us deal with the forms, benefits, and myths of human communication. Now, it is said that of all the knowledge and skills that one can acquire, communication skills are the ones that are the most useful. Your ability to communicate will always play a crucial part in how effectively you live your professional, personal, and intermediate life. And in this way, we see that it is vital to your success to learn how communication works and how to master its most essential skills. In this way, we see that this is absolutely important for your success because if you're able to communicate well, if you're able to send the message across to the other person just as you have intended it to, this will make you an effective speaker and an effective communicator. At the same time, we see there are many benefits that one can gain through exposure and mastery of the various forms of human communication. Now, these forms of human communication also range from one person communication, that is, you talking to yourself, to communicating with millions, as in public speaking, mass communication, and using various other social media platforms. So let us move to the first form of communication, that is intrapersonal communication. As the word suggests, interpersonal communication is the communication that you have with yourself. Now, through intrapersonal communication, you talk with, learn about, and judge yourself. You persuade yourself of this or that. You reason about possible actions to make and rehearse messages that you plan to send to others. In intrapersonal communication, for example, you may want to analyze what you did in the past and how you could do it in a much better manner. You talk with and learn about yourself, what you have done in the past, you analyze it and try to correct it for the future. For example, if you went for an interview, you may have been a bit nervous. So once you come back, you analyze the entire interview and see what is that you could have done differently. And in this way, you increase your self awareness, your mindfulness, and your ability to think critically about all types of messages that you passed on during your interview. Next, we see that this information that you gain from analysis on the self, on perception, listening, as well as verbal and non-verbal messages will provide a foundation for learning about how you need to improve in the next round. It will also provide you a lot of information about what you need to stress on and what you could do away with. And hence, we come to the second form of communication, that is interpersonal communication. Interpersonal communication is communication between two persons or among a small group of persons. Now, most often we see that the communication emphasized in the study of interpersonal communication is a communication of a continuing personal nature, in the sense it's communication between or among intimates or those involved in close relationships. For example, friends, romantic partners, family and co-workers, etc. Now it is said that these relationships are interdependent relationships in a way that the actions of one person have an impact on the other person. So whatever one person does, it will influence the other person in some way or the other. At the same time, we see that sometimes interpersonal communication is pleasant, but sometimes it can be challenging as it erupts into conflict, making each person's communication especially significant for the other. And therefore, we see when it comes to interpersonal communication, one should also be a good listener because one also needs to listen properly, listen well in order to understand and then act according to what the other person requires. The third form of communication is interviewing. Now, all of us are familiar with the word interview, and we also know what happens in the interviewing process. So, basically, in simple words, we can say that interviewing is communication that proceeds in the form of a question answer format. Through interviewing, you are able to learn about others, about what they know. You are also able to counsel or get counseling from others. And we see that there are various ways of conducting interview. So earlier it is to be just face to face, but today we see that with the development of various technologies, with various platforms of having online sessions, interviews are also held online through many of the video conferencing apps. Now we see that many of the skills for interviewing are the same skills that are noted for interpersonal and small group communication. And in the way we see that through interviewing, you are able to get a lot of information about others. But here we see that depending on the type of interview that is taking place, the information could be very formal or very informal. For example, when it comes to a job interview, the person may not want to reveal everything about himself. But when it comes to a counseling session, you would see that the person opens up much more fully. And in this way, we see that this also format of question answer is quite effective in today's world. The next form of human communication is the small group communication. Now, as the name suggests, small group communication is communication among members of groups of about 5 to 10 people. Now, small group communication serves relationship needs such as those for companionship, affection, or support, as well as task needs such as balancing the family budget or doing some other chores or planning some new event, etc. Now, through small group communication, you interact with others, you are able to solve problems, you're able to develop new ideas, and also share knowledge and experiences. You live your work and social life largely in groups. So, most of our life, when it comes to social life, work life, is mostly in groups. And in this way, we see that from the meetings that we have in school to the executive board meetings in the future, from informal social groups to formal meetings, everything that we do does take place in a group. Most of the time, most of the meetings in the offices or even among our friends are the small group communication. In a way, we see that in today's world, we also live a good part of our life in online chat rooms. And there are so many apps, so many programs which enable us to interact with the other person through video conferencing platforms. Apart from that, there are also various apps which now allow for conference calls or conference meetings. And in this way, we see that small group communication in today's world also is effective in order to plan, to get things organized, and also to help relationship needs as well as problem solving. The next type of communication is organizational communication. Now, once again, as the name suggests, organizational communication is communication that takes place within an organization among members of the organization. Now, conferencing with colleagues, working in teams, talking with superiors, or giving employees directions are some of the examples of organizational communication. At the same time, we see that the study of organizational communication offers guidelines for improving our own formal and informal communication in organizational setups. So once we study about organizational communication, we will be able to know the effective methods of how we can be an effective speaker in both formal as well as informal modes of communication in the workplace. The next form of communication that we shall deal with is public speaking. Once again, this is a term that is quite familiar with us. In school, we have been taught about public speaking. We tend to have elocution competitions wherein we address a crowd or we address our classmates or the entire school. At the same time, we are sometimes given an opportunity to address the entire gathering. So public speaking, as the term goes, refers to communication between a speaker and an audience. Now, audiences range in size from several people to hundreds, thousands, and even millions. Now, through public communication, you also tend to inform and persuade others. And at the same time, others can also inform and persuade you to act, to buy, or to think in a particular manner. Now, much of the things that you do in public communication, it can range from whether you speak to just 100 people or to a room or through forms of mass media, through various programs of conferencing, you can also reach millions of people throughout the world. Therefore, it is said that you can either address large audiences face to face, and at the same time, you can also address the same audiences electronically and through mass media. And during the pandemic, we have seen how electronically developed platforms have been very effective in enabling people to communicate as well as to discuss, to come together and have meetings online. Our class, for example, is an example of how electronic media is enabling us to achieve our intended target. So as we have said, in this way, we can also address the audience face to face or electronically. The next form of communication is the computer mediated communication. Now, computer mediated communication is a general term that basically includes all forms of communication between people that takes place through some computer, electronic gadget, or internet connection. Now, what are the examples of this? Texting, blogging, sending emails, tweeting, chatting, or using social network sites such as Facebook are all examples of computer mediated communication. Now, it is said all of these computer mediated forms like their face-to-face counterparts are used socially as well as they are used in the business world. Now, some computer mediated communication is asynchronous, which means that it does not take place in real time. Let me give you an example. You may send a message today, but the receiver may not read it for a week or may even take another week to respond. This generally happens when it comes to emails. You send a mail to a person and you're not sure whether the person has read it or no. And sometimes, even if the person has read it, he may not respond to it at the same time. Now, consequently, what happens is much of the spontaneity that is created by face to face real time communication tends to get lost in asynchronous communication. Now, we see that other forms of communication, other forms of computer mediated communication, such as tweeting, chatting on social network sites, or even using apps such as Zoom, Google Meet, WebEx, and other interactive websites are often synchronous. They occur at the same time and are similar to a phone communication, except that computer mediated communication is largely text based rather than voice based. Next, we come to mass communication. Now, mass communication, as the term suggests, is communication from one source to many receivers who may have been scattered throughout the world. Now, mass communication takes place through a variety of media outlets. For example, newspapers, magazines, television, radio, film, and video. It is said the coverage of mass communication is especially important in today's world. As you can see that through various platforms, news passes and goes like wildfire. You can send a message or you can publish something and within seconds, it reaches all the parts of the world. And now we shall take a look at some of the benefits of human communication. So, knowing the benefits of human communication will enable us to put more efforts in studying human communication and also in looking at the forms, elements, and methods so that we too may become effective communicators, effective speakers who can effectively pass the message to the audience. Now, it is said that before beginning any study of any subject, the question that we normally tend to ask is why? For example, why are we doing this course on human communication? Or why should I spend so much time learning about the benefits of human communication? What will it do for me? In short, all our questions tend to ask one important question: how will I benefit from this study? Well, we see that there are a lot of benefits. And first of all, we see that a knowledge of human communication and by mastering many of its skills will help us to improve a variety of skills that will be important for our success and which will be also important in our lives. We will also be learning critical and creative thinking skills, interaction skills, relationship skills, leadership skills, presentation skills, media literacy skills, etc. So, in this way, we see that by learning about human communication and the forms of it, we will be able to understand all these skill sets. And in the end, we will become effective communicators only when we focus on these 6 skills, which are absolutely essential. First is the critical and creative thinking skills. Now, these skills help us to approach new situations mindfully. By mindfully, I mean by being fully conscious, aware of what we are doing. It also helps us to increase our ability to distinguish between a sound and valid argument and an argument that is filled with logical fallacies. It also helps us to improve our ability to use language and to reflect reality in a more accurate manner. So, in other words, sometimes we may just say without even thinking. And in this way, we see critically analyzing certain things helps us to really distinguish what we want to say and also whether the argument that we are involved in is useful or does it have certain amount of flaws. Next, we have the interaction skills. Now, the interaction skills help us to improve our communication in a wide range of forms. And this could go from seemingly simple small talk to an employment interview for the job, which will be important for us in our lives. Now we see that interaction skills will enable us to communicate with greater ease. We will be more comfortable and effective when we try to interact with others. And therefore, knowing about these interaction skills, how to interact, how to present yourself, will help you not only in your personal life, but also in your professional life as well. Relationship skills. Now, relationship skills enable us to build friendships, enter into love relationships, relationships with colleagues at work, and also to interact with family members. Now, these are basically interpersonal and relationship skills which are specially essential for initiating, maintaining, repairing, and even sometimes dissolving relationship of all kinds. And unless a person intends to live all by himself, these are the skills that you will be using in your day-to-day life. In every encounter, whether in the personal or professional field, these skills are absolutely essential. And therefore, we see that these are the skills that businesses of all kinds have on their list of most important competencies for organizational success. That is, when you go for a job interview, one of the skill set that the employees also look is for relationship skills, how you can interact with your colleagues and how you can interact and build bonds with the company as well as the customer. Next, we have leadership skills. Now, we all know that a leader needs to be very effective in communication, and having good leadership skills helps to communicate effectively in small or large group settings. Therefore, we see if the leader is confident, if the leader is competent, he will be able to infuse the same energy into the others. He will be able to take the group forward, because what happens is when the leader is able to show that he is able to take up a particular task, his group members get energized, they back him up, and they give their 100% in all that they do. On the other hand, if we see that a group leader, if he is not capable, we see that the entire morale of the group is depleted. And in this way, the group doesn't tend to progress forward. Therefore, when it comes to leadership skills, whether it is in the school or whether it is in the office, leadership skills are important part of our day-to-day lives. In the workplace, especially where most of the interactions is through group work, especially for planning for projects, we see that leadership skills play a very important role. Next, we have the presentation skills. Now, how you present yourself is very important in life. When you present yourselves to others, you are able to communicate whether you are confident, approachable, or a credible person. Now, your effectiveness is just about anything that heavily depends on your self presentation. Now, the way you present yourself can also display positive and negative qualities. For example, if you go for an interview formally dressed with with your hair combed and neat and tidy, you will basically be giving a positive message to the ones who are taking the interview. But at the same time, if you go shabbily dressed, you would be providing negative vibes and negative feelings to those at the interview. And in this way, we see that the message that you send across is very important. Sometimes you may not be aware of what message your body language is giving to the others. And therefore, being aware of this is absolutely important to develop the presentation skills. Now, it is said it is also largely through the skills of self presentation that one can be effective. So, if you present yourself well, not only in your class presentations or office presentations, but also in the manner of your dress, in the manner of your speaking, in the manner of you addressing people, these skills play an important part in your success. And finally, we come to media literacy skills. So now these skills will help us to interact effectively with both mass media as well as social media. Now, these skills will also help us to understand the functioning of media, that is, how the media operates, how to interact more effectively with media, and how you can be a more effective media creator. In the sense, how can you use media to reach a larger audience? So, in this way, we see that these skills are the benefits of using the various forms of communication. And in today's world, we see that having these forms of communication play a very important role in our lives. If we want to be effective speakers, if we want to be effective communicators, we need to use these forms of communications. And most importantly, we need to be aware of the benefits and the messages that these forms of communication convey to the other people. So, keeping this in mind, in the next topic, we shall be dealing with some of the elements of human communication. Till then, thank you for your attention and see you next time.